So today's theme is good trouble, necessary trouble. And I struggled on what I would talk about as someone who doesn't necessarily understand all those things. But you think about John Lewis and the life he lived as a change agent. As he stood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on March 1st, 2020, he made the statement, get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and redeem the soul of America. So now you can look at that statement, you can take it how you want to, you can abuse it, you can use it for motivation, really behind anything you want. But we have to look at it in the context. And to do that, you have to look at what his life exemplified. You know, if he were standing here today, what would he want us to do to redeem the soul of America? Well, lucky for us, he told us. He laid it out. He said we have to vote, especially African Americans. As he famously tweeted in 2018, he said, your vote matters. If it didn't, then why do some people try to take it away from you? Get educated about the voting process. So we know that the 1965 Voting Rights Act has been gutted. It's up to those at the grassroots level to ensure that people aren't disenfranchised until there can be some federal legislation to correct this intentional Supreme Court decision. Call your congressmen and your senators and have them pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that ensures equitable access to polls. Congressman Lewis also taught us that you're never too young to make a difference. I see some students here, I still consider myself young. Some of the students may not consider me young, but I do. I'm glad you consider me young. Thank you. So discounting someone's age, isn't unique to any single movement. It's been happening to me since I was sworn in as a city council member in 2011 at the age of 27. Now, there is wisdom in age, but there also is this social conditioning. As we age, we often fall into the trap. This is the way we've always done it. We have to understand that everyone has a unique perspective to offer. One thing I've learned in my career is that while youth provides vigor and passion, it also creates impatience. True, sustainable social change takes time. Think about it this way. You're not just changing policies and procedures. That can be done with a single stroke of a pen. You're changing habits, changing ways of thinking. Those habits and ways of thinking have been part of a person and a system for decades, even centuries. We're not going to change those in a weekend. We're not going to change those in a speech. We're not going to change them with a social media post. You got to learn to talk and work that a more experienced generation, having those crucial conversations and simply asking the question, why? It's a great moment when you ask that question. You see that light bulb go off because a person sometimes never really stopped to think, why? Change isn't accomplished in a social media post. It's not accomplished in an echo chamber. It's hard. It's resisted against. But that process itself isn't a zero-sum game. See, there's compromise in the process. It's not a checkers match, it's a game of chess. Congressman Lewis taught us to be an equity broker. Now, what does that mean? See, if you're not at the table where the decisions are being made, Congressman Lewis said you're on the menu. You got to have representation at the table. You have to be at the table. Then you ask, how do I get at that table? Well, like everything in life, it's about relationships. I know for some, especially today, it's easy to get trapped in the idea that social media is the change agent. Well, it's not, it's the tool. It's not the entire toolbox. If you want to be a change agent, you have to form those relationships that actually change can happen. This goes back to the idea of everything being a zero-sum game. It's not. When you're changing decades-old thoughts and habits, you have to be persistent and never give up. Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation has to do our part. So think about this, of persistence. John Lewis was elected to Congress in 1986. One of his first bills in 1986 was the creation of a national museum to chronicle the history, culture, and success of Black Americans. The culmination of that bill wasn't passed until 2003, and in 2016 opened as the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We have to persist to have those transformative ideas. You should work to push to get others on board with you to make it happen. As I was looking at this and thinking about what I would say, I looked at an article from the making of the movie, and some of the ones that were involved in that making the movie kind of had some points that they took away from Congressman Lewis. And the first one is always do what you can, no matter how small. When confronted with a problem, Lewis always would think about what he could do rather than focusing on what he couldn't, even if what he could do was small. Be prepared to be persistent. He never sought that instant gratification. He was always looking long-term at systemic change. He said it's about just adjusting the expectation of both what is practical, then having the vision for what is possible going forward. And he was so skilled at holding both ideas at once. He would say, this is what I need tomorrow, and this, 20 years from now, is what I hoped has happened. And I'm going to focus on both things at the same time. I'm going to keep the long-term vision, but I'm not going to lose sight of the short term. Then you got to find your joy and your balance. Sometimes I think our problems are so large, they can swallow up a person that's trying to help. He made a point to carve out that special time so he could find that balance so he wouldn't be swallowed up. Then he said, don't let your circumstances limit your imagination. So can you imagine that time growing up as a sharecropper, having the experiences he had? No, you wouldn't blame him at the time for just giving up because he was worried about what he's going to get to eat. He was thinking about freedom with that capital F. It's one of the many reasons that we celebrate John Lewis. He never let the circumstances limit his imagination. He came from walking up and down in the sun with blisters, picking enough so that he could go have that subsistence living, then to writing laws that shape America. Then lastly, having that relentless optimism. So whenever you feel like the world's against you, just think of John Lewis. Think about what he experienced and what he saw, the things he worked on. If he can be optimistic, we can too. If you're not hopeful and optimistic, then you just give up. You have to take that long, hard look and just believe that if you're consistent, you'll succeed. So I'm going to leave you 2 quotes by Congressman Lewis. First one is, you are the light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and to entice revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. They said we've come a long way in America because of Martin Luther King Jr. He led a disciplined, nonviolent revolution under the rule of law, a revolution of values, a revolution of ideas. We've come a long way, but still have a distance to go before all of our citizens embrace the idea of a truly interracial democracy, what I like to call the beloved community, a nation at peace with itself. Thank you.
Mayor Scott Conger, thank you very much, sir.